So good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's steering committee meeting in South Burlington for June 18th, 2025. We will start with a pledge of allegiance, and Councilor Smith is going to lead us in that. Flags in the back.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So now we'll hear instructions on exiting this building in case of emergency and a review of our technology options with Jesse Baker Senior.
Hey, welcome to City Hall. Thank you all for being here. If there's an emergency during this meeting, you can go out to the left or right of this door and go down the stairs you probably came up in this corner. Or if we can't get out that corner, there's the stairs all the way back down by the kitchen where you had dinner. For those who are participating remotely, which looks like most of us, if you would like to speak during any item on the agenda, please indicate that you would like to speak in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. Otherwise, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you. Item 3 is agenda review. Are there any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of our agenda tonight? Hearing none, we will then move on to item 4, which is comments and questions from the public not related to tonight's agenda. Is there anybody online that has a comment? Hearing none, we will move on to item 5, which is approve the minutes from our last meeting, which was March 3rd, 2025 for the steering committee. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Moved. So, second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion about the minutes at all? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Sounds like it's unanimous. And we'll go to item 6, which is school board directors and city councilors to introduce themselves and share what brought them to service in South Burlington. Why don't we start at this end? And with Elizabeth, you'd like to? Because it says school board directors and city council.
We should introduce who's here.
Well, why don't we start with Steve?
All the way to the
Okay,
end.
it's a done list, but I'll grant it. I'll grant it.
Get rid of my piece of gum there.
Sorry, Steve.
No worries. Stephen Locke, I'm the fire chief / deputy city manager here. I've been here about 3 years and I came to South Burlington really for all the positive things that are happening and because I get to work for a great manager.
I'm Jessie Baker. I have the privilege of serving as your city manager. I've been here, I did this morning in our leadership team meeting with welcoming a new staff person. I've been here 4 years, 18 days, and now about 10 hours. Just great. It's been a great 4 years. I've worked in municipal government for about 18 years. I started my career in child welfare as a foster care caseworker in New York City, and then got a master's in policy and planning specifically around child and family policy. I was working in program evaluation in Boston and lived in the city of Somerville, Massachusetts, and really loved my community. And decided I was tired of working in a high rise in downtown Boston. And wanted to work on community. So I got a job working for the city of Somerville as pretty much doing program evaluation, working in a city stat program, if anyone's ever heard of that or watched The Wire. That's the only pop culture reference to it. And I fell in love 2 weeks in. I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. If you can build communities that are strong and healthy and have good housing options and good employment options and good parks and good public safety, then you can have strong, connected, healthy children and families. So that's why I come out to work every day. I'm privileged to work with the incredibly talented team we have here in the city and the city council, and look forward to working with you all more as well in the years to come. Thanks.
Right. I'm Elizabeth Fitzgerald. I grew up in Winooski and moved away for many years. And when I came back with my children, I chose to settle in South Burlington largely because of the schools and became very active in the schools, as many of you are aware, on the board for many years. And really looked at the opportunity with an opening on the council to really understand all the great things our city was trying to provide and have the potential for schools and city to interact and really make our community even better than it is. I'm very excited about my council experience. I'm excited about the interaction schools and city can have. And I just think there's a lot of possibilities and a lot of challenges that we share going forward. And with our common taxpayer, I think it's important we go forward with a unified message too, and understand what the challenges that each of our municipal bodies have.
I'm Laurie Smith, and I'm in the middle of my second year serving as a council member, and I live in Queen City Park, which is over next to Red Rocks Park. And I came to work serving on the council because I see us in very dynamic and very challenging times, and having enjoyed the benefits of being in this part of Vermont since 1978, it felt like it was time to be able to give back. And so I look forward to working more with the school district and figuring out healthy solutions to big problems that are on the horizon.
I'm Tim Barrett. I'm the chair. I moved here in '92, bought a house with my then almost wife. Then we got married, had kids, went through the school system. And then in 2005, the head librarian at the community library in the high school said, Tim, you need to join the library board of trustees. I'm like, okay. So then 5 years on the board of trustees, then 4.5 years on the DRB, the last 3/4 of a year as the chair. And then somebody else asked me to run for city council. And that was a time when there was a little bit of churn about the Marcotte School and a developer and being purchased. And there was a lot of angst about that. And so I decided to go ahead and run. And so I've served three-year terms, and I got reelected in March. So I'm starting my 4th term. And so that's why, because somebody asked me to. And I couldn't say no. You couldn't say no to Marge, the librarian. She was wonderful. So.
Andrew Chalnick, I'm the vice chair. Been on the council for 2.5 years now. I ran because I love this community. Really am struck every day by how civic and civil and kind people are. And I think that's really unusual, and we shouldn't take that for granted. And I thought for this kind of community, just be very rewarding to serve and to work for the community. I have background in finance, engineering, law, and I also thought I could bring that good experience to bear on the council deliberations. And what also motivated me was our children's future. I care deeply about the environment and climate change, and I want to help advance policy to try and ensure our kids have a good future and that the city is sustainable.
My name is Gracie Morris. I just graduated SB last week. Thank you. I've been a student rep for the past 2 years, and I applied to be a student rep because I really loved my time in South Burlington, and I think I just really wanted to understand kind of the inner workings of our district. And I'm also interested in government and policies, so it's just been a really great experience that I feel really lucky to have been a part of.
My name is Allie LeDuc. I am an incoming senior at South Burlington High School, and I've been on the board for 1 year as a student rep. I grew up and work on a land and education-based farm and realized how important community is to me, and thought school board's the perfect way to get connected with the community around the high school, and also was interested in amplifying student voice at this level, so decided to join. It's been awesome.
Hi, my name is Momin Makar. I'm rising junior, so this is my first year, like my second week on the school board. I've lived in South Burlington my whole life, and I've been in the school system since kindergarten. And I applied to be a student rep because there's a lot going on in the school board that a lot of students don't know about, and I thought I'd be a good person to try and understand what's going on and be able to convey it to the student body. Yeah, it's been fun so far.
Hey everybody, I'm Seamus Absher. In my other life, I have 2 little girls, both of whom are currently at Rick Marcotte. And so far they're having a great time. I have a software company that's based in Burlington, And the reason that I joined the board, there's two reasons. First of all, I think that the way that people hear public servants and representatives is different now, and I think that we have to adapt the way that we talk in order to get money from taxpayers to build stuff. And so I think it's extremely important that we take into account who our audience is, and so that's number one. And then number two, I can't remember, so it must not have been.
My name is Emily Hoffman, and I've been on the board for about 3 months or so, 3.5. And I grew up in South Burlington. I'm just trying to do the math. I think I've probably been here for almost 40 years. But I went to UVM and I lived in New York City for 1 year, but I decided to come back because South Burlington is just my favorite place on earth. And I decided to join because it means so much to me, this whole community and the school district. And I feel very deeply that I want to make it a better place for my children who are in school. Ones who have graduated had a wonderful experience, and I want my current son and everybody in this community that I love to have a good time in their school years. And also I felt like I was feeling a little anxious about the climate of the world, and I really wanted to just get involved in a place that I could. And the seat was open. It was like meant to be. So that's why I'm here.
My name's Laura Williams. I'm originally from Rutland and Pulteney. And yeah, I grew up there, and then I lived out of state for 22 years, came back in 2010, and I teach at Essex High School. And I just think there needs to be more of a teacher voice on school boards. That's why I decided to run.
Dan Boyer. I was born and raised in the New York City area. I used to come up here in high school and college skiing. So after 20 years in naval cryptology, I decided I didn't want to go back to the hustle and bustle of New York, and came up here to ski and then work for the South Burlington Police Department, which I just retired from that last year. And both my kids went through the school system, have graduated now, and are on to other things. Joined mainly for like fiscal responsibility reasons. And yeah, I was just elected this year, so that's about it.
Hi, I'm Tim Warren. I've been on the board for approaching 2 years now. Got on because I just wanted something to do, attended board meetings, and a seat opened up, and there I was. So here I am now. I've had lived in South Burlington for approaching 30 years, and I've had 3 daughters go through the school system. 2, my twins just graduated on Friday. So, and I had an opportunity to speak at the graduation. So it was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. So it was great to see them go through the system, and I hope to help maintain the system in its great state. So thank you.
My name is Jen Lawrence, and I am also new to the board, about 3 months in. And so our family actually moved to South Burlington 3.5 years ago. We were on a road trip looking at colleges for our, at that point, triplets who were rising juniors in high school, and all of them decided that they liked the University of Vermont best. And so we just had an opportunity in life, and we just made the move. And so they all started school at North Beach Campground because we couldn't find a house at the time. But then we did some research and just kind of quick risk assessment and determined that South Burlington at that point had the best schools in the state. And so we decided that this is where we were going to stay. And so our triplets graduated from South Burlington High School. They're all now at the University of Vermont. We have a son who is a rising senior in Allie's class at South Burlington. And I decided to run for the board because I feel like we're in a small town and I feel like voices matter. My background is I'm an environmental geochemist, and I've done a lot of work with project management. And I thought that, you know, interaction and collaboration and communication and driving continuous improvement are my passions, and also wanted to see the, you know, best that we could do here with education in this area. Very happy to be here.
This was lovely. I've been listening so deeply. I have nothing planned, but it's nothing new. I'm grateful to be here with you all tonight. I care very deeply about public education. I'm a third generation public school educator, and I believe deeply in public schools. I see them as the hearts of communities, and I am heartened sitting around the table with you all and appreciate the the relationships that have been developed in support of students and community. I recognize the really difficult times we're in many capacities. Folks have mentioned the climate at large. Others have mentioned finances, facilities. I think there's a lot of things that we can acknowledge are difficult, but it's been really lovely to hear all of the positive sharings about a really exceptional community. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to serve as school superintendent. Thanks for having us.
Good, thank you. Thank you for all your critical stories. Move on to item 7, which is an overview of city government operations and priorities with Jesse Baker.
Great. Share this. So when Chelsea and Tim and Violet and I were planning the agenda for this meeting, we thought it would be useful to do kind of a 101 of the governance of our two bodies, because they are quite different, and give you a little background about what we on the city side of the Dorset Street City Center do for the city, and then I think Violet's going to share a very similar governance presentation back. So this is our overview of operations. I'm going to go through it relatively quickly. Council, this is old news for you, so thank you feel free to jump in when I say something wrong, you too, Steve. So I'm going to go through this relatively quickly, but it I think is hopefully useful to you all. So municipal government in Vermont is enabled by Title 24. Vermont is what's called a Dillon's Rule state, which means that we as a municipality can only do that which the state gives us permission to do. We are one of 4 Dillon's Rule states in the country. All other states are what's called a home rule state, which means municipalities can do anything they want as long as the state doesn't tell them they can't do it. So it's an inverse relationship. I think it's a real linchpin of why the fallacy of local control is true in Vermont. We like to think we have a lot of local control, but we are actually children of the state on the municipal side. So we operate under what's called a council manager form of government. So for example, unlike Burlington, where there is a mayor who is elected from the community to serve as the chief executive officer of the city, and does that in a council manager form of government. The city council is elected at large from the community, and the city council hires a professional city manager to run the operations of the city. And I will get more into the difference in our authorities in a few minutes. So ultimately, the voters elect the city council hires me, I run the operations of the city, and I'm accountable for that service delivery. And the most important thing we do is hold trust with our community. There are very few things as a municipality in Vermont that we have to do. There's actually only 3 things. We have to run elections, we have to maintain town roads, and we have to maintain property records and vital records. Other than that, every service that we offer to the community is because South Burlington has asked us to provide a service and has asked us to provide that service in a professional and exceptional way. So our responsibility as professional municipal employees is to hold that trust and ensure we're delivering that service in a way that meets the community's expectations every day. So to tell you just a little more about who we are, we have about 195 employees who work for the city. It's across 15 departments and 3 labor groups. So we are represented by AFSCME for our public works, city hall, and library staff. The police department has a specific police union, and the fire department has a specific fire union. We have 8 city buildings and 11 parks and natural areas that we oversee. So to give you a little more detail about that, because I think it tells the story of what we do. So we have the police station, we have 2 fire stations, we have 2 wastewater treatment plants. We operate this building. We own Wheeler House and Public Works. Oh my goodness, the biggest one, Public Works. And the largest asset we own is the Airport Parkway Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is down off the end of the runway. And it's about $100 million operation that runs most of our wastewater treatment. And if you would like to talk about that, I am happy to talk about that. So I'm gonna spend a few minutes talking about authority. This is authority that's granted under our municipal charter. The municipal charter is kind of like the constitution of the city. It is actually a state statute. It can only be amended by the council sending a charter change to the voters. The voters then have to approve that charter change. Then it goes to the legislature. The legislature has to consider it. If they approve it, then it has to be signed by the governor. So the things we do are actually enabled by state statute. I've included some hyperlinks in the attachment on your agenda today. So if you see anything in red here that you want to go and dig into, that should be a live link for you to go and explore. It's meant to be a one kind of stop resource for you. So the council's the authority the council holds is to hire and manage a city manager. They also have a few other positions that they appoint annually. The staff report to me, but are appointed by the council. You see them listed there. They appoint residents to boards and committees, both regulatory boards and policy committees that I'll talk about. The council serves as the liquor control board for the city and the board of health of the city, as well as the water commission, wastewater commission. They can make and repeal ordinances, so the laws of the city that are unique to South Burlington, solely the council can make those. They have the sole authority to acquire land, to sell land, and to make other property deals. They have ultimate financial oversight of the city, so they recommend a budget to the voters every year. And then they can convene public hearings to hear feedback from the community as they make their policy decisions. And with you, they, per the charter, serve as the steering committee for the community. They do this with about 130 volunteers who work with the city every month to serve on a policy or regulatory board or committee. They are listed here. The regulatory statutory committees of the city are those that have independent authority under statute. So the Development Review Board, the Library Trustees, the Planning Commission, all have unique things that they do on behalf of the city. The council then also has the authority to establish policy committees. These are committees where they are seeking additional feedback from the community around areas of specific policy interest that they need to be informed by other voices and have those voices help them in their policy making role. And so you can see the policy committees that are listed there. So housing, bike plan, the charter committee, economic development, energy, natural resources and conservation, pension, public art, and recreation and parks. So that's the policy and financial oversight authority of the city. So then moving into the city manager's authority. So the city manager serves as the chief executive officer of the city. So I have the authority to manage, the obligation to manage our budgets, minister them, and report on them. What that means in our form of government is that when the council sends a budget to the voters, they send a budget under specific operations areas. So police budget, fire budget, public works budget. And within those buckets, I have the authority to manage how those funds are spent within those buckets. I oversee enforcement of all ordinances, obviously with a huge team of people. And serve as the personnel director for the city. I have the exclusive authority to hire and fire city staff. I do not need council permission to do that. I obviously have an obligation to regularly report to the council. I attend all meetings and I am the primary support person with Steve for the council to ensure that they have the information they need to make the policy decisions they are making. One of the things I think it's always important to know is that while we as a city are providing the services that the community asks us to provide, because we do certain things and employ certain professionals, they have an independent obligation under statute to do certain things. So for example, with zoning administrators, which are the folks who who enforce the land use regulations, what you can do with your property. For zoning administrators, for police chiefs, for fire and building inspectors, and for the city clerk, they each operate within their own independent state statute authority. So for example, I can't tell the chief to go out and arrest somebody. That person can only do that under the authority of federal and state law and local law. Before I get into kind of the policy documents of the city, does anyone have any questions about that organizational structure and how our authorities work? It's kind of wonky. I love talking about it, so I get really excited, but. So in a council manager form of government, we are charged with implementing the council policy. So we have a number of significant policy documents that hundreds of folks in our community have worked to write and that ultimately the council has adopted. And those are the guiding policy documents that we as staff look back to when we are implementing and providing service to our residents. So our city plan, it's what's called a master plan or comprehensive plan under state statute, outlines our 8-year plan of where we're going as a community, what we want to accomplish, what are the high level goals and visions of the city, and it's what we work towards every day. It's a really beautiful document. If you are looking for some beach reading over the summer, highly recommend it. And it's guided by these 4 key principles, which is to be climate resilient, inclusive, fair and just, people-oriented, thoughtful, and have a people-oriented, thoughtful and sustainably built environment, and collaborative and engaged with our community. Rolled into that city plan is our climate action plan and a number of other master plans that we have adopted in recent years or are currently working on. Having said that, in a council manager form of government with a comprehensive or a master plan, there are an infinite number of ways staff could spend their time every day furthering a wide variety of goals and actions that are outlined in the city plan. So annually, the city's leadership team, the department heads of the city and the city council spend intentional time together thinking about what are the priorities for the year and what are we doing to operationalize those priorities on a day-to-day basis. It's an intentional and thoughtful process where we try and align our shared goals for the year, develop a shared work plan for the year, so we know what we're doing. We know that we are working towards that vision that the community has adopted and the specifics that the council would like. We have a shared work plan that we operationalize over the course of a year. We are right in the middle of building this for this year. The leadership team and the council will meet next Friday and have our annual working meeting where together we put together that plan. What I have linked there is this year's what we call our policy priorities and strategies work plan. The FY26 work plan will be adopted by the council in July and August following that working meeting. And we have a lot of priorities that we already know we're doing. So as folks probably know, we are in the process of hiring a new police chief. Our library director is retiring in October, which is also a very important position for our city. We are hiring a new stormwater team. We are also doing a lot of work to modernize city government. We are implementing a new finance system, an online permitting system, and really centering the use of data to make operations and policy decisions for the city. We have about $84 million of capital projects underway. These are big infrastructure projects. Obviously, the biggest of that is our Bartlett Bay upgrade, wastewater treatment plant upgrade. We also are building a walk-bike bridge over the interstate and a bunch of other capital projects listed there. Thank you for your patience with construction. We will be under construction for many years to come. We're doing $2.1 million of paving this summer. So it will be a busy summer for construction. We are also actively working on an economic development strategic plan, a parks and open space master plan, and a growth management plan, and are implementing a climate action plan and an active transportation plan. And then all of those are outside of the core government we provide every day. So when I talk about core government, I talk about responding to calls for service, whether it be police, fire, medical calls for service, maintaining roads, maintaining water lines, wastewater lines, stormwater lines, and then running rec programs and checking out library books and processing invoices. So we're expecting about 18,000, little over, calls for service in the coming year. We maintain 300 miles of pipe under the ground, and a couple of other statistics that you can read up there.
You're actually expecting more, if you go back to that, you're expecting more police, fire and EMS calls for service than library card holders. That's a lot.
Yep. So we run we are full-time professional police and fire and EMS. So we have police officers, firefighters and paramedics and EMTs on every minute of every year, and respond to thousands of calls every day.
What is the population of South Burlington?
21,000. So if I think most of you should be getting the city newsletter as part of your school or city account, but if not, or if you want to pass on to your friends, this is the best way to know week to week what's going on in the city and the emerging issues. Please sign up for City News. It's a great resource. It links you out to a lot of other communications, much like the superintendent's newsletter does. It's our equivalent of that messaging in the city. And then this is me. I would welcome emails, phone calls from any of you at any time. If you have any questions, I think the best, much like our policies and strategies process, the more coordinated we are, the more we are champions for the work one another does, the more able we will be to hold the trust of the community. So please reach out. Love to hear from you. Thanks.
Questions for Jesse at all?
When do you expect the bridge over I-89 to be completed? You know, I know that you're not building it.
We expect it to be completed July 2028. So we are out to bid right now for that project. It's about $24 million project. We have two significant federal grants for a total of $20 million coming into that project. It's out to bid right now. The bids close the middle of July. We're getting some really I talked to the council about this on Monday night. Again, sorry, wonky municipal government details. It's a really interesting construction because it is a significant bridge over a highway, but it's a bike bridge. So it's not the same, you don't need the same level of construction and support you would need for a bridge or, a traffic bridge. And so part of the component is much more efficiently purchased as a prefab unit, but it has a long lead time. So with our federal grants, we were expected to hit substantial completion July 27. And the contractors who are bidding on our project said, we won't be able to bid if you hold us to that date because we can't manufacture the pieces fast enough. So we have just in the last week pushed that out to July 2028 in order to get the most competitive prices and ensure that we are able to deliver the project on budget with an extended schedule. So shovels in the ground next summer, 2-year construction.
Another question. And maybe this question, especially for Elizabeth, but also maybe others who have worked in policy governance context. Can you kind of compare and contrast your governance model to our governance model?
You want to? I think the the comparison would be, we're all working on policy in support of strategies. I think the education curriculum that's dictated, I think the education side of it is a little bit more dictated at the state level and the federal level. So the monitoring policies that are in support of policy governance roll up to that. Whereas what Jesse showed up here is we have these annual strategy and policy updates, and then the deployment of city staff toward accomplishing those goals. So the policy side of it is developed around those priorities. Obviously, there's lots of state and federal guardrails and parameters. But I don't know if you'd agree with this, Jesse, call it a little more project-based and policy in support of project. I don't know that that's a best description.
Yeah, I think there is, I would say it's equally policy and project-based because the ordinances of the city dictate a lot. We're not actively necessarily updating all of those all the time, but as needed or as at the direction of implementing the climate action plan or meeting housing goals, other things that we're trying to do. But from a project perspective, a lot of the time, a lot of the work the council spends is on identifying those significant projects, funding those significant projects, ensuring community feedback on significant projects. So it is, I think the work of the council is almost more project-based than policy-based, but policy is absolutely at the foundation of it.
So go ahead.
And I think that's why I also emphasize the point that there's really only 3 things the city has to do, because the reality where I think that's a huge difference between our 2 organizations. The council has a lot more freedom to shift and allocate resources and shift and allocate priorities than the school board may have. But that's my perception.
It's so funny, Jesse and I have been asked this question in our, in shared company numerous times, so that's why we look at each other and chuckle. Yeah, I think you all have both articulated that accurately. I see that the school's directive is, really driven by the ends. There's guardrails of, really clear federal and state regulations and laws. And then, they're monitored through policy. Everything of my, that you'll see when I talk to you about executive limitations means do the job, don't break the laws in these ways, kind of, right? And you all are like, let's check in with the community, see what kind of projects we want to do. Do we want to focus on conservation? Do we, we're gonna build this great footbridge, right? And I'm over here with, duct tape on this dam trying to offer the same ed quality while the funding evaporates, right? So,
there is an element, I think, in policy governance of preventing crises from happening. And I think on the city side, and this is having sat on both sides, it is a policy prioritization. And I think the city plan is an excellent document. And the school does have a strategic plan, and that starts with the ends policy. So I think articulating things around those master plans is always a safe way to go, however they are implemented at the tactical level.
Yeah, we have similar master facilities planning, continuous improvement planning, a lot of those sort of documentation pieces we share. Should have just shot me your slide deck and I could have just pasted in. I didn't get, my presentation will be at a much higher level, sort of just really articulating our governance structure.
And with that, do we want to segue to the next agenda item, which is your presentation?
I'm ready to roll when the team is. Yeah, great.
You want me to share, Violet?
Let's see. So
you're on.
sure you can. I'm in the meeting. It said video permission is turned off. Let me see if I can share.
Request to share?
Yes.
Jeez, oh, there you are.
Got it.
The door would be shut.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
No, Andrea, she is our executive assistant and really kind of runs the show here.
She's shy though.
Yeah, shy, great. Okay.
Thanks, Andrea. Tales Online, good evening. I'm Violet Nichols and I am the superintendent of the South Burlington School District. And tonight I'm going to walk you through our global ends policy and our governance structure. And, I think there were times when districts had ends policies, and now there are fewer and fewer of them. So I wanted to spend a moment walking you through what this means. So our priorities, rather than being determined on an annual basis, have been articulated by previous boards, and I think there's one of those members in the room who weighed in on this. So everything we do, this is kind of our guiding light here, our North Star. So I'll read you this statement. I promise not to read every slide, but I think this is worth a moment of attention. So the South Burlington School District's global end statement, meaning that this is our ultimate goal. It drives our organization and all the work that we do in support of students, staff, and community. So our global end statement is that students successfully complete their education from the South Burlington School District ready for their next step. They will show cultural and academic competence appropriate to grade and developmental capacity. All graduates will be prepared for college, career, or individually determined next steps. The ends will be met at a cost that the community will support. And that's a really critical piece here. So we want our students to be prepared for whatever it is that they choose when they leave our system. And to do that, we need to work with our community so that they
And that reminds me of the other thing I cared about is putting trades in there near college.
Yes, it's funny when I read that. I will always think of you now when you mentioned that. We had some good discussion about that at a panel on a stormy Saturday a few weeks ago with some former board members. I know Elizabeth was there, and we talked about how the ends could be modified. When Seamus first came on the board, he said, "How do we modify these?" And Elizabeth and I were like, "Well, we can talk about how it can be done." So that would be a process which would involve a significant amount of community engagement. So what are our priorities? What are these ends? So a disposition for lifelong learning, that's critically important. We want our students to be prepared, not just for that final exam, but really ultimately for life. Academic proficiency, we want to provide that sound educational experience for students to flourish. Personal development, this is something that you might not have seen 25 years ago. When I was in school, this was not something that we focused on as heavily, but we want our students to be intrinsically motivated and prepared for success and to know who they are. That's linked to citizenship. We want to support the growth and development of our students becoming good citizens. I didn't cry when I shook Gracie's hand at graduation, but hearing her now when she says, I'm really interested in government and that's a passion. I thought, like, what a great person to be a future leader and to be involved in leading. We need those great leaders. So I went to this when you were talking about your next steps. So an example in real life. I also didn't cry when I shook Tim's daughter's hands. They have his exact eyes too, which is wild because they're 18-year-old girls. And they have glitter on their lips. But so it really is all about the kids, right? So that is our guiding work. So how do we do that? The board has said to me, Violet, achieve these ends. Here are your limitations. So through every means necessary, you may achieve the goals that we just talked through. However, you cannot break these things. So, I will walk through what those are. Those guidelines are monitored by the board. So the way that the board ensures that I am fulfilling our ends is through what they call monitoring reports. I've listed here the different monitoring reports here. I was about to tell you that in 3 years, I've never been out of compliance, but I've just tarnished that streak right before coming here. That is to say, we really do strive for excellence in this area. And the board monitors all of these annually. It's my responsibility to put forward information to the board showing them that these have been achieved. And I'll pause here. Are there any questions or comments on this piece that I've wanna go into it this time? Elizabeth, you're in this photo, I just realized. Oh, that's in front of probably a Zem's opening. See here. So what is the board's responsibility other than ensuring the district's operations are running effectively? There is a board management delegation component. The superintendent is, as the city manager, the chief executive officer of the district, and the superintendent is the sole connection to the district through the board. So communication flows from staff to superintendent, superintendent to chair, board to chair, and superintendent to board chair. Seamus, I'm appreciative that he's his new chair, and I probably terrified him the other day when I said, I usually communicate with the chair on a daily, I've had 5 chairs now in less than 3 years, and I usually communicate with them daily. But that communication is critically important, of course, for the success of our organization. Yeah, you're relating to that, yeah, right, of course.
Daily, but sometimes a week.
So a little bit about the governance process. The board is elected by the residents, and a few big jobs of the board is that the board ultimately approves a budget, and that it's the board approved budget that is brought forward to the community, which is a really critical piece here. And some of the important pieces here are the governance styles. We have a policy governance model right now. We use Robert's Rules of Order. There are board job descriptions. Agendas are planned. There is a chair, and there are roles that are articulated for the chair's responsibilities, like there are for board members. And there are structures articulated for committees and governance, investment. The board does have the authority to modify the governance structure. There are some boards who have operated under a modified governance, policy governance structure, for example. So that kind of concludes the very high level description of how the board runs, what we're all working toward, and the superintendent and board responsibilities. I do have just a few legislative updates I'll share. So this slide is already out of compliance. Those in the room and perhaps listening remotely will have seen my communications recently. When I wrote this, H4 454 had been paused. The bill was at an impasse as of at the end of May. And what we knew at the time was that there would be an update expected in mid-June. H454 did pass, and it's anticipated that it will be signed by the governor. So everything that I've sort of listed here, disregard that. What I can share right now, and I'm sure some of you have read the Digger article and so on. This is anticipated to take effect in fiscal year 29. I've had many questions from folks in this room about the financial impact. Some of you saw my May 21st communication bill, where I said, it's really premature for us to provide any kind of firm financial update whatsoever. I had shared a white paper from the Joint Fiscal Office, which outlined that there were many political decisions that had not yet been determined, which would have significant financial impacts, or significant impacts on the financial impacts for districts. And one of those pieces is the reconfiguration, and then the weighting of students. So we have the governor's plan for the future of education, which sort of dovetails with this legislation. So we're pretty far out. I'm hearing from legislative contacts that they're anticipating quite a lot of modifications before we actually get to implementation. So I don't want folks to panic by any means right now. There is a lot to be figured out. The determining, drawing of maps, I think is gonna be a really significant project. And when that is determined, I think we'll start to get a better understanding of financial impacts. So I really want to be clear that I cannot with any amount of certainty share a financial impact. We've anticipated it will be millions of dollars, roughly 4.8. Again, that will change. We know that with Act 127, South Burlington was negatively impacted due to the weighting, which provides additional dollars for rural areas and a number of other areas where South Burlington received lower weights. So we've received less money from the Ed Fund every year is a way of saying that succinctly. So we're going to continue to stay tuned to updates regarding education reform and mapping and district structures and state board. Lots of conversations around class size, around district size. None of this has been finalized, but those are some of the big markers that we're watching, and I'll certainly report out on those.
Does that include the statewide assessment responsibility or not?
Yeah, so right now, the Agency of Education has a Rule 2000 series associated with education quality standards, and districts have to abide by these. And that articulates a local comprehensive assessment plan.
Ooh,
So
I was talking about property value assessments.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry.
I thought I went to academic assessments.
That's important too.
Well, there is conversation about the assessment plan with this as well, so it is a
This is
factor.
interesting too.
Can you repeat your question, Tim, please?
So included in that bill, is there the change in the where the state would take over assessing all the property values itself instead of having each community do it?
Interesting, so not to my knowledge,
Not included in that problem.
I
didn't talk about that this session, right?
And there is an active study committee happening right now at the state level to examine what the feasibility is of the state taking it over or other models.
I don't see that linked directly to the schools. I think that's something that's really being looked at in a broader context.
Well, they're talking about 12 school districts, is that approximately right? That could change.
There's been a lot of discussion on that. It's not determined yet. It started with 5, it's vacillated, there's not a set number at this point in time. There's a study committee that has been commissioned for this summer that will be looking at drawing maps. When that discussion started initially, career technical education centers were a huge driving factor. CTEs, as they're called, get really little attention in a lot of everyday conversation. But there is a requirement for students to have the opportunity to participate and take advantage of career technical education centers. I had a conversation with a state senator, Ram Hinsdale, on this issue. And we had a discussion about preliminary map drawings, and they all made sense, except that South Burlington wouldn't have had, our students wouldn't have had access to career technical education center. So I'm grateful for, our state senators and legislators who are connecting with me around this issue. It's been really wonderful to have the opportunity to advocate for our students here. So stay tuned. I'll certainly keep you updated when I have additional information.
Any provision for healthcare cost containment?
So healthcare is negotiated at a statewide level. It is there are school board members and National Education Association members who negotiate that, and much like our local budget negotiations, right? At this point in time, there's been no discussion on. Well, there's been discussion about statewide teaching contracts and statewide calendars for the reform. No decisions have been made on those. when the plan came out in the fall, I sat with the secretary and I said, hey, we're engaging in everything from calendar development to negotiations. How do we proceed? Others were saying we have, capital projects we're in the middle of, and they said, business as usual, proceed as though there won't be any closures occurring. So the conversation that I participated in around healthcare and contracts has really found folks saying, the NEA is advocating to meet the top. So South Burlington is that top salary for staff. And so it was realized pretty quickly that there would not in fact be cost savings if that were to happen. So that's just preliminary discussion that I've heard from those who are thinking about that. None of that is determined yet. Good questions, thank you. Any other questions on H454 that I can answer? All right, so this is, you won't have heard of this next one, selection of library materials. So, I watch I watch what's happening at the state level. And one of the things that I've been following is selection of library materials. So we have an internal process, but now it's a required board policy. So we have been, I brought one forward. There was a model policy through the Vermont School Board Association. And I brought that to our curriculum director and librarians, literacy coaches. And I said, hey folks, take a look at this. What do you think? And they said, Violet, we are more interested in the procedures that accompany this. And that made perfect sense to me because the policy is somewhat boilerplate on this one, and which is certainly not always the case. But the board is having readings of that. There are 3 public readings on any policy before the board will take action on it. So we're in the midst of, the board is reviewing those and the community is hearing those at this time. And then internally, I will work with staff to ensure that we've got procedures that accurately reflect how we are carrying out this policy. Let's see, what are we tracking? This cell phone bill. So this time last year, I was really immersed in a lot of rich conversation with teachers, staff, parents, community members regarding cell phone use in our schools. We were, one of the first to come out and say, all right, we're going to implement some internal restrictions. So we implemented internal cell phone restrictions. Our student reps reported out on how they were going mid-year. We are now tracking a cell phone bill, which is in the Senate, so S-284. And that will be going to the House next. And if that passes through the House, then to the governor for signature, and then it'll be something new that the district has to implement. The Vermont School Board Association is likely to introduce a model policy on that. I would then work with our teams to see, to provide something that fits South Burlington, and then I would present that to the school board, where we would go through 3 public readings and receive community feedback on that.
Do we expect it to be more strict than our existing policy?
Hard to say. I don't know if Laura, I don't know if you've been tracking this at all.
It's a day-long ban.
Yeah. Bell to bell, I heard.
Bell to bell, that's,
So
and parents really need to get, if parents aren't on board, but it's the #1 problem. It is the #1 problem in the classroom. And any parent who says that's not true is fooling himself because it is the #1 distraction. So it'll be tricky. I'm ordering a box that locks for my classes.
yeah, so last year,
I'm so.
We will warn this policy with relish.
What kind?
Well, no, I don't know about relish because it's gonna be very hard to, parents are gonna fight it every step of the way.
we found, so we bought those box cell phone homes, as we're calling them, but Laura identified them accurately. They are locked boxes. there's lots of different, you have the like almost those shoe holders.
We have the,
top of the
yeah, and I've
pockets.
been collecting phones for 9 years, but I'm going to the lockbox.
Yeah.
Because children are pretty brazen, they'll start walking towards you as you're, it's kind of scary, actually. I mean, I don't even think it's funny because we've given an addictive device to a child, and now you're asking me to get in between that drug of choice and your child. It's really actually kind of scary. And high school kids are big and they will knock me over to get to that phone. So if I have it locked, then they kind of walk toward me. It's kind of scary. So I'm over it, as you can tell. Yeah. So it's, I think it's.
So did your policy have an effect? The one that you do have an effect? Did the teachers have a positive result from that?
You wanna speak, oh, can I turn it over to our student
Yeah,
reps? If you get the on the ground a current perspective?
I'd say the expectation has definitely shifted and the overall culture with using phones has definitely improved. Teachers have kind of given up on using the phone homes, but the expectation is totally that no phones are seen in classes, and I think students really comply with that. I can really only speak to my senior level classes with that. Do you guys wanna speak to your experiences?
Yeah, sure. I would say the same thing as Gracie. Most of my teachers started using the boxes and realized that that was actually probably more of a hassle than just keeping your phone in your bag. So the expectation is your phone's in your bag. If it's seen, it's brought to the office till the end of the day. If it happens multiple times, your parent comes and picks it up from the office for you. Definitely been a cultural change. Like I think students are on their phones less at school now in between classes even. Just we don't use the boxes.
Does that mean your watch is off too?
No, but usually
Did
some
you turn
teachers,
Bluetooth off before you put it in your bag?
some teachers take your watch for like tests anyway.
Good.
But there have not been a policy about watches.
So there is, so we have a pre-K to 12 cell phone restrictions, and at the pre-K to 5 level, which is our elementary, no smartwatches are allowed and no phones are allowed at all, period.
Yeah.
Same thing at the middle school. And at the middle school, we didn't implement phone homes. You know, it was phone home in every class. At the middle school, students come in and they put their phone in the home, and then they at their homeroom, and then they retrieve it at the end of the day. So it's different at each developmental level.
I think it's been going well. It's been going well as well. It's been nice that like each teacher, they have almost like their own policy about it. For example, in my chemistry class, a lot of the time we'd have to photograph things or record things that wouldn't really be possible on our computers. So our teacher says, you know, if you can have your phone out, but if I see you using it on something that's not, you know, just for the sake of the class, I'll be taking it. Or my math teacher in the morning, he says, you know, I'm not gonna make you lock your phone up in every morning, but I'll be watching you, and if I see your phone, you know, it's done for the day. I'm not gonna be lenient about that. So it's giving each teacher the ability to enforce, you know, if I see your phone, it's going to the office right away. I'm not gonna be lenient about that. But also for like things like student and lunch or a free block, they still have their phone with them. They can, you know, do what they please without having to go to the office every time and get it.
Thank you all so much. I appreciate the on the ground reporting. Thank you. And you get 3 different levels there because we have, you know, just an exiting junior, sophomore, and senior. So we're missing the freshman perspective, but I appreciate that. Any other questions I can answer for the team?
Is that the end, last one?
The last slide I think says thank you. Do you have any questions? You can find tons of information on our website. Everything from our continuous improvement plans to our facility stewardship plan, all kinds of information. And please reach out to me anytime too. I'm happy to direct anyone to anything or answer any questions that anyone has at any time.
Congratulations on the new road next door called Attilio Drive.
Thank you so much. Very proud of our students.
Might be on my lap.
Yes,
Yes.
it's covered by your name tag, but your nameplate. Yeah, that was a fantastic civic experience, and I want to thank all those at the city and on Jesse's team who supported that. That was a really cool process, and our students were so proud to work with the city and that. And they had real agency, and I think they named it appropriately. I think they nailed it. So yeah, that was a wonderful celebration. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about the school governance or the presentation? Okay, then we'll go to item 9, which is discuss a request from the school board to put forward a charter change to shift the date on which school items are voted on and possible action.
So please.
Would you just assume, like explain like I'm 5 and just go super simple, because I struggle to understand it. Please explain like I'm 5.
Yeah, so this is very much preliminary discussion. The last time the two bodies met, there was discussion on this topic. I think we left that meeting thinking we really need more information. So this agenda item is pertaining to whether there should be a shift on the town meeting vote. This became I'll give you the why first. So the last 2 years, there have been education funding formula changes, which have really gotten the attention of South Burlington voters, particularly for this current fiscal year, because after the board had, Tim, you're the only one here who will remember this, warned and approved a budget. Overnight, that 12% budget became a 23.5% budget. And that was for our current fiscal year 25. And it was the first time that there had been a change in the ed funding formula that late in the game. During this winter, when we were developing a budget and the resources were even more scarce than the year before, folks started saying, oh, like we just got the December 1st tax letters. We just explain it like you're 5. The district relies on a lot of factors, which are important inputs in the budget. And those factors don't all come in until about January 1st, right? And then the budget needs to be warned by charter by like January 20th. And because all public discussions happen in open warned board meetings, because we want and need community engagement for the board to determine what they're going to bring forward to the community, there is a short window of time, and it's often over the winter recess when families are not necessarily engaging, right? They're celebrating holidays, they're spending time with loved ones, folks are on vacation, could be out of town. So we started hearing feedback from constituents that the timing wasn't sufficient for us to be talking about expenditures or inclusions in the budget. So what does that budget look like after we have all the final numbers? So for the city knows all of their factors at the onset. They can determine financial goals or look at priorities and build the budget from, reversely engineered or based on a need or based on a number. The schools have to have meet a lot of requirements, and the money, the tax rates have varied so dramatically the last few years based on ed funding changes, and they've happened late in the game. So it's really hard to have a transparent budget development process when there is sometimes maybe 1 or 2 meetings where you can really talk about what will be included in the final board approved budget that will go to the community on town meeting day after all the inputs are in. And I can simplify that if that was too complex. But the,
I wish we had a whiteboard and you could say
Yeah.
like, this is the line where the city knows their numbers and this is when they have to vote on it. And here's the line where the school board knows its numbers.
Yeah.
And when we have to vote on it.
I'll
And
say
I
there's
think
like-
one is way shorter than the other.
yeah, it's like a 3-week window where we have all of our information. Folks are on vacation, school isn't in session. We typically don't have board meetings when school isn't in session. So we typically don't have, some months you see back-to-back board meetings because we don't wanna have a board meeting on April vacation or summer vacation, right? We have that one meeting in July where we approve hires, but we're not conducting business when those we serve are not available. With the exception of this, 3-week time that we have to the board to, they finally have the inputs, which the state level factors, which determine tax rates and cost per pupil. Folks are often surprised, or like, wait, I didn't hear discussion on this or that.
And so are we asking that the date be changed to the same as the city?
That
Or
would be,
What's the
Yeah,
what's
so-
the most reasonable suggestion?
so that would be the board's prerogative to, the board hasn't at this time made a formal request to the city. That's kind of, I've outlined the issue, but I'd say the board would need to work with constituents and engage the community on, what does the community wanna see here? Pros and cons of each, having.
And what's concretely, we would vote in. Like, what would the difference be? We'd be voting in May instead of March, or we'd be voting in, what is the most likely situation that would be?
So there's possibilities, that would have to be determined, by the board. Essex Westford has an April vote date. That would be, I think, the best time because if there was a revote necessary, you'd have time.
And that would be pushing it by a month.
Depending on when in April, yep, so town meeting day is usually around March 5th for us. We need to have a budget in place prior to the start of the new fiscal year, which is July 1st. Should the community not have a school budget in place, we can borrow up to 65% of the previous fiscal year's budget, paying interest on our $71.5 million budget is not advisable. Let's see, so you need to have a budget in place by July 1. Some of the pros about a March or a meeting, a school budget vote that is aligned with the cities is voter turnout. But of our 21,000 residents, we're seeing only a few thousand every year. We know that 80% of our community members do not have ties to our schools, just 20% do. So the other pieces is that we split the cost of the cost associated with voting with the city as we share the date now. So, there is some, I think, valid concern with reduced voter turnout if the date is shifted. The just charter change wise, I'll let Jesse get into the details when Jesse and I have talked about this preliminarily. Any kind of charter change would be, you're looking at about a year time frame. So this is not something that could be you couldn't expect that this would happen super quickly. Any other questions, Seamus?
I have one more question. I think Elizabeth, you had sent around an update about that I'd love to hear about, but if let's say that the city council was like, wow, they had a great idea, let's move the date. Do they have to ask our permission?
So typically what would happen is there would be warned agenda items on the school board side. And there would be, for something of this significance, I would recommend the board warn this many times and discuss it with community members, if not straight up have a committee about this. This would be a significant change and it would require really robust engagement from the board and the community.
Right, but separate from the community engagement aspect, I'm just wondering, is there any legal authorization we need to provide to the city that says do it, or can
Yeah.
the city just do it?
Yes, so after the engagement pieces, the board would either decide to authorize me to write a letter to the city manager who would share it with the council, and I would be on behalf of the board making your request. Then the city manager Baker and I would work to get that on an agenda. And we would be prepared, I would attend council meetings to speak on the issue. And then the council would go through their governance process and warn it, have discussion, and ultimately it is the council that would make the decision on whether that charter change would occur or not.
So I think that's a no. Like in the sense of like, the process you described, I'm sure is appropriate, but when it comes down to it, it's a decision that the city council makes with our advice.
Yes, yes, it's the
And
city
then
council's decision.
And then it's the legislature and the governor.
Yes.
It doesn't stop with us. We have voters and then the legislature and then the governor. So you may decide and we may decide, but that's not the end of it.
That's a good question. Legally, could we just unilaterally decide to change the date of an election?
There-
Hold on.
Go ahead. Well, I did pass on a note, the many committees that Jesse talked about, we do have a charter committee. And I happen to be the council liaison for that committee, but the current chair of the committee, Anne Lalonde, sent a note over that I shared with Violet and Jesse and Seamus and Tim, just about that there was some feedback that the charter committee got from a member that said there's the potential that the council might be able to change that date on its own without a charter change. So I don't think we really know that.
Yeah, I think you're asking really great questions. I think, the council, people can silence their cell phones. That would be super helpful. Tom, can you silence your cell phone, please? When the council and when the steering committee previously talked about this issue, this question, as Violet mentioned, the outcome of it was to have a specific request in front of us. Because to Councilor Fitzgerald's point, it depends on what the ask is. If the ask is a charter change to change the date, that's one legal process. If the ask is let's pilot it for a year in another date, that could be another legal process. But before we do that legal analysis to understand what those different threads would lead to, we want to understand uniformly what the school board was interested in and not have a meandering conversation and therefore use legal resources to determine that. So that's what I think the kind of point of this conversation was, is there interest in continuing this conversation with the new composition of the school board? And if so, could you make a specific request? And we're happy to do the legal legwork to figure out that path. And I think from going out on a limb with my electeds here, I think you are probably right that they could unilaterally. I can't imagine that would happen in this community.
Yeah, I didn't mean that as a suggestion.
I have a question.
Done.
This conversation, I totally understand why it's taking place, given the squeeze that you have around budget and vote. The idea of separating the school voting day and the city voting day versus changing both if a change is gonna happen is a discussion that I think is worth having so that we know the implications of what we're doing. And is there appetite in the city? I'm asking you this in part, Jesse. Does it make sense? What is the complication of changing the voting day or town meeting day for both the city and the school versus separating them and having two different elections? And what makes sense? If it doesn't make sense to separate them, then we have a bigger question of how do we move both of them.
And I think part of the answer to that, or the beginning of the answer to that, is we can't know until we get a request from the school board
Yeah.
to make a change, period.
And I find myself getting confused again, and I'm sorry about that. I thought what you were saying, Violet, was the budget is, we would get better turnout because we'd be voting at the same time as something else. And so I thought that there was like this one obvious date that we wanted to converge on. And what date would that be? Or what, I'm sorry, what event would that be? Like, how do we make it?
I think voter turnout is low. And I think that mathematically speaking, it would only reduce both the city's turnout and the schools if they were separated. I think having them at the same time is the way that we get the greatest number of voters.
And in that sense, your logic makes total sense to me. The concrete details just keep slipping my butt. So are you saying that the city should move its date too? So that it's in
Bringing
alignment
forward-
with a
so
later?
I'm
Like,
not
what's the
putting
thing that
forward
makes sense?
any request here. So this is, this was done under the previous chair. Like this isn't, I am providing information to the board right now, and to the council about, some pieces that I'm anticipating. I think the real issue, and this came up in discussion because there was too short of a window for community engagement. So should the school board say to the council, we have tough financial years coming. We need to work together and align our priorities. What if we worked together and had an first week of April? So say we extended it by 3.5 weeks, I don't know. Would you be amicable to that? And then the council might say, it's a non-starter, here are the reasons.
And sorry, so in that, we'd say April 15th or whatever, we wanna move it. In that request, are we asking them to also move their voting to that day?
You could ask them.
Because you have the best turnout. You don't wanna split it.
Okay, and
You have to ask for anything you want, is what I
we can ask for anything we
saying.
want, okay, but like the thing that Elizabeth was talking about, where potentially we could pilot something. That would be where we move only the school budget vote, right?
We do have some data on that. So for our revotes, no one is voting on the city budget, and our revotes have about half the turnout as our initial voting day.
No, I
So
believe you.
that is worth looking at when you think about separating the two dates. I wouldn't recommend to the board or to the council or anyone to separate them. I do very much want to have more robust engagement with our community. I think the way Essex, that first week of April date does appeal to me for that reason.
But they're separate, that's a separate vote, and that's how they've done it for years.
And so your suggestion around being able to have a pilot program, that does involve separate, is that maybe what Lori was saying, that I missed?
I don't think I was recommending anything specific, and I don't know if Anne recommended a pilot, but I think that's what Jesse's saying, is the request needs to come from the school and school board around what would you like the council to evaluate? And you've got examples, Essex splits the dates. I don't know, there could be some benchmarking done around, is the school voter turnout half, as you've said?
It's pretty low in Essex, it's pretty low.
So my question, just jumping in again, was if council, city management are feeling that we don't have an appetite for changing our date and we want to keep the dates the same, then having you guys go through the effort of making a proposal to us, if we're not willing to entertain it, seems like a waste of effort. So my question is, does it make sense to get some guidance from the city and council as to our openness to this before you guys even go through the process of coming forward with a proposal?
Yes.
So
The alternative is just go do your work, make a proposal, and we'll see what happens. Because you gotta make a request first before we can take any action. And I don't want us to do any work until you concretely come forward and say, how would you feel about X?
I wasn't talking about us doing work. I was gonna ask you, Jesse, what is your feeling about shifting our
Well, we can't
Voting
really,
day.
I mean, that's not something that I think we need to work on here right now. With all due respect, I think we were just trying to relate what this process could be, right?
I wasn't looking to work on it, I was trying to get some sense, just a gut sense of, oh, that's a really tough lift, or that's something you could consider.
I don't think the board should make any recommendations without talking to the community first.
Right, I think that should be our first forum. Yeah, I
So there's some
totally.
research that has to happen
Yeah.
in two ways. You know, what do the other communities do?
Yeah.
What's their turnout?
100%.
Yeah.
And what do you think the appetite is here? And then what's our appetite?
Yeah,
Sorry.
so maybe we
Okay.
can.
Can I thread a middle ground between the
Sure.
two of you for a second? So I think there are some key questions if anyone's moving forward that we should think about. One is if we're moving the date, what's the calendar to enable a revote, like working from June 30th backwards and figuring out what that timeline actually would be. Two, I think we need to proactively think about what we do every 4 years when we will always have to have a March election for a presidential primary. Do we do something different in that year? Three, what are the pros and cons of separate or together? Four, what are the pros and cons of the institution of town meeting day in the Vermont and the free publicity we get out of that and shifting it around. So I guess those are like, I think we're in it together, whatever we do, but I think that there are some things we would want to be very intentional about in answering the questions if we were gonna move it forward.
I also just want to throw out there, I'm not quite sure what impact H 454 is going to have on this or the potential move to a foundation for me.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, this could be a whole point there. I think there will be
Yeah.
some potential district voting possible for if we want to go beyond what the state is going to give us. But I don't think we're going to have the kind of robust discussion around funding that we've had, within in 3 years. It could all be very different, which I just want to say I'm very sad about, because one of the reasons I got onto the board was because I really wanted to understand the funding formula, and they're changing it. So,
But you got there.
but I got there. I understand it, but now they're changing it. So
Can I ask another question? Well, two questions or one comment. Is there any value in determining whether a change in date requires a charter change? Is that a straightforward question, or do you think that should precipitate from a request?
I think a request is.
But I mean, if it's just an hour of a lawyer's time, and that helps us to know whether it's worth public hearings, all these things. I mean, I agree with Elizabeth that it's it's one thing if it's an hour, it's another thing if it's
Linda,
16.
I have no idea. I'm just,
Well, but there's a legal question and there's a policy question. And I think I agree with Jesse's sentiment that even if we have the authority to do it without any other process, I'm not sure we'd wanna take that authority on.
Yeah.
I think we have some research to do, so I think that's. And I can do that, and Essex, they've been doing this for years. Find out, and I'll find out why they switched. I think it's because their budget kept getting voted down.
And how they switched.
Yeah, and how they did it, yeah, that's easy for me to find out.
yeah, and the other observation is, I don't know where the requirement is if a budget fails, that a second budget be presented within 30 days. Because that also creates an incredible time constraint. I mean, you basically have to have a revised budget in your pocket.
For the
So
first revote.
if you are looking at a potential recommendation to review a date, is that another element?
Yeah,
That
that
might
happened
be
at Essex last year. They had it under 30 days.
Yep, and then the second vote doesn't have that 30-day requirement, but it does have the requirements about the public hearings. So you can't do it in less than 15 days. Because you have to have everything and have that engagement, so.
And that might be just worth looking, is that
Yep.
also
Yep.
worth looking at, or if it's able to be looked at the same time?
I'll dig up my, we've done a presentation on this and we put the dates here. I proposed that to Tim, you were on the board then, when I put revote dates out. We had a number of options, so I can share that information with the board.
So the ball's in our court.
Yep.
Any other discussion on this item? We'll move on to other business. Is there any other business?
I had one other comment as liaison to the charter committee. The school board has 2 delegates on the charter committee, and the configuration of that committee was voted to stay the same. There've been a different approach taken on 2 different issues. On the expansion of the school board and the ward system, the delegates took that information back to the board, and the board provided direction to your delegates of what to take back to the charter committee. On the all resident or non-citizen voting, the delegates, my understanding is the delegates did not present that information to the board and subsequently voted independently as separate representatives on the charter committee for that initiative. So that's really just more, I'm sharing that information with you as the liaison to the committee, and it's really up to you to sort of make a decision how you expect your delegates to participate on the committee.
That's accurate. I'm glad you brought that up. So the board, I think, I'd recommend the board have those representatives. So Wendell Coleman and Kate Bailey are the representatives. So I think, the board should assess whether they, those folks want to continue being in those roles. And then have them at board meetings, to share information, and then the board can, make a stance. Previous boards did not make a stance on those issues, which is why the delegates voted as individuals. But I do think it's important for the board to provide direction to those delegates who are representing the school side.
So to clarify, there are a number of committees, like the all citizens voting, and what was the other one?
The one I'm
The
liaison
charter
with the charter committee,
committee.
and there are other committees that have school board.
Safe
Safe
routes
routes
to school.
Okay, and they have delegates from us. And currently those delegates did not receive instructions from us about how to vote, and so they voted on their own. Okay, and so.
Which is not necessarily inappropriate.
No, of
It's the
course not.
expectation you set with those you appoint.
Our committee members vote without checking in with us.
Okay,
They're given the authority to.
Well, their votes are recommendations to us.
Yeah.
So it would be, it'd be circular if we.
yeah, no, I bring it up. I just like, I view it as my job to ask the dumb questions, and sometimes like, the way you described it, I felt like you started with more knowledge than at least I had, and so it's good to.
Well, the fact that you have delegates, it's really up to you to decide if you want to put an agenda item now and then on a board meeting to have the delegates report in what's going on, that kind of thing.
Yeah, we've done that.
Well, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate all the graduating seniors from South Burlington High School class of 2025 and wish them the best of luck in the next step, whatever it might be, wherever they might be going to school or a job, whatever it might be, right? So thank you for another good crop of kids.
Pleasure.
A good crop of young adults.
Absolute pleasure.
So congratulations. Any other comments or other business tonight? Well, then can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And we will do this again